Trussell Trust, which is the biggest provider, has got 400 food banks, which I think distribute to 1,200 different places. And then there's a network of 900 independent food banks. So this is happening on a massive scale. And I think another interesting point, and what we were trying to do with this piece to give some context, was to think back to when this really all began, because food banks, there's always been patchwork support, mostly through faith communities and support support for the homeless and for certain vulnerable communities, but it's not happened on this scale before. So in 2011, the Trussell Trust was giving out 130,000 food parcels, and in March, in less than 10 years, that reached 1.9 million. So really, we're trying to stop at this point and give some background and say, how did we get here, and really, what's the exit strategy?
Yeah, those are, again, incredible numbers, and it surprises me all the time when we talk about these things, and when I'm doing the research for the show, that I'm like, I can't, that we hear about these things, but sometimes it's never hammered home in the way that the investigations that you guys are doing have proven. One of the things that astounded me was the idea that these are being exported over the world. So are they really occurring all over the world, and where are they going, and how are they getting there? What's occurring here?
So there's something called the Global Food Banking Network, and it's based in Chicago. And this is one of the bodies that is promoting food banks as a solution to hunger. And it may not surprise you that it's also it's got some very big corporate partners. So people like the agribusiness firm Cargill, the BlackRock investment firm, PepsiCo, Caterpillar, people like that. And the reason that these big food corporations or people involved in food, perhaps not in the case of Caterpillar, perhaps it makes tractors, I'm not sure what its connection is, but these big, extremely rich corporations have an interest in obviously making themselves look good. But in the case of food companies in particular, food banks are a way for charities to actually deal with their waste problem. So we'll come back to that point in a little bit. But in terms of how it's spreading, this global food banking network has over 900 members. There are now food banks in 80 countries, and there's been a 23% increase just in the last year. There's someone who's tracking this. He's about to bring out a book, and his name is Dan Warshawski. And he's been kind of tracking this over time and thinking about the reasons behind it. The Americans are particularly good on this because they really invented food banks and have a whole sort of shadow system running alongside the kind of corporate retail industrialized food chain. So they're really the people who started it all, and they're also the ones who are exporting it now.
Well, when we talk about this, and you say, oh, it's a solution to food waste. Is that a bad thing? I mean, should the food just go in the bin? Isn't it good that it's getting used?
So that's I think that's a really seductive idea, that no one wants good food to go to waste. And having produced the waste, is it better that it gets eaten by somebody? Yes. Can that be channeled to like quite innovative, dynamic projects that cook up meals for people and use food in really interesting ways? And like environmentally, of course, there needs to be a solution to food waste. But I think the problem is that you're dealing with the waste situation really downstream. So you're not questioning why supermarkets have 50 to 100% more on their shelves that they could feasibly sell at any time. You're not questioning why it is that there's massive overproduction in the first place. And we know that that's about efficiency, it's about speed, and ultimately it's about profits. But there are all sorts of what's known as externalities, costs. The food may be cheap at the end of it, or it may be making big profits, but it's not cheap for the environment. And ultimately it's not necessarily providing the nutrition that people need. So this relationship between food banks, waste, and corporations has led Dan look at his name each time or I'll say it wrong, Dan Warshawski, has called food banks a corporate market correction mechanism for the food retail sector, which I think is really interesting because it's not the way you usually think about it. And so I think the problem with this is that, yes, the food might as well be eaten now it's been produced and it's about to go in the bin, but it's really a distraction from the structural reasons that people go hungry. So you will have a company like Asda, which gave 25 million to FareShare, which is intermediary that dishes out food to charities, and the Trussell Trust, 25 million, but it fails to pay many of its own workers a minimum wage. So the food banks allows the certain things to go unquestioned, structural reasons for food poverty, whilst allowing some of the people who are behind that to come out looking like saviors. But I think, also the thing that's really interesting, we spoke to African aid workers about food banks opening up in the Congo, and Salome Ntuba was really surprised at this and was like, but we don't give out food, we give out cash. Like the question about, if people can, it's not about actually being able to access food, it's about it's not about the availability of food, it's about your capacity to access it. And so she was talking about how cash is way more dignified, that humanitarians arrive in Haiti after an earthquake. They don't dish out food, they give money to market traders so women can start cooking again and selling and get things moving in the local economy. Like, it's totally retrograde to be giving out this really humiliating, despite volunteers' best efforts, humiliating way of receiving aid. When there are so many other ways to do it. And we talk about lots of other ways to do it that are more positive, and also lots of the people who are involved in giving out food are also campaigning against low benefits, long waits for benefits, about the structural reasons for poverty in the first place. And I think that's happening more and more.